For any team, communication is absolutely essential, but in a crisis or in a change situation, communication is going to be more important than ever. Now, it's going to be a particular challenge in a crisis because you may be communicating with new people, different people. You might be using new forms of communication that you're not used to. You're likely to be under time pressures, so you're probably going to be rushing. And also you might be talking about new topics. So there's a real risk here that you might be making assumptions or information might be implied and you don't realise that that information is being missed. So let's have a look at some fundamentals of communication. So communication is a 6-step process. The first step is that the sender encodes some information. They then have to transmit that information, and that is then decoded by the receiver. So this has got us as far as getting a message to the appropriate person. However, what we haven't confirmed is whether or not that's been properly understood. So the final part of this loop is that the receiver needs to encode a response. They then need to transmit that response. And finally, the original sender has to decode that response. So we've closed that loop. We've got all the way around, we've encoded a message, and we've got confirmation, verification that it's been understood. Now, in a crisis, we need to be absolutely sure that our communication is working, and we can use this model and we can look at each stage in it to say, how should we be doing this? So we can think, actually, who are we communicating with, and what is the best way for us to encode the information so that we can be confident that they're going to receive it and be able to decode it. We need to choose appropriate means of transmission, check that people have decoded it. But the really important bit is making sure we don't miss all of this section here. And that's what will happen when people rush. We need to make sure that we are getting feedback to verify that the information has been transmitted and understood correctly. Now, teachers are brilliant at this. This is what they do in the classroom. They ask verification questions, and normally we use various other techniques. So we might read people's facial expression, we might know people well and get a feel for do they understand it, or we can have an assumption about what they're going to understand when we tell them something. But in a crisis, all of this is likely to fall away, and it's also going to be more important than ever that people correctly understand information. So we need to fill in this gap, and our superpower for this is open questions. So these are questions that can't be answered by a yes or no. If we start asking yes/no questions, we get no verification at all that what we're checking has actually been understood. We want to use open questions, so the when, where, who, why, how, what, those types of questions that force the person who's decoded to give us some feedback so we can verify, has this communication actually worked? So, in a crisis, make the time to communicate correctly and use this 6-step model. Always think about, how do I encode the information? How is it being transmitted? Has it been correctly decoded? And then you can use your superpowers, your open questions, to force this feedback so you can verify that the communication has actually worked.